a special meeting, and I would just remind members that this special meeting is taking place in open business. And I'm going to kick off as usual by asking the Chief Executive to read the notice and summons a meeting and also to take the attendance, please. John.
Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, members. To all members of Derry City and Strabane District Council, you're hereby summoned to attend this special meeting of Derry City and Strabane District Council to be held remotely today, Thursday, 22nd of April at 4 p.m. As the Mayor said, starting with the roll call, Mayor, would you mind just muting your mic there for a moment? Someone's mic is on there. Thank you. Alderman Bresland.
John.
Sorry, Hilary, is that you? Sorry, Alderman Bresland.
Apologies from Alan.
Oh, thank you. Alderman Devaney.
John.
Alderman Guy.
Here, John.
Alderman Hussey. Alderman Hussey. Alderman Carrigan.
Here, John. Here.
Alderman McClintock. Alderman McCready.
Apologies, John. He may join later.
Thank you. Alderman Ramsey.
Apologies.
Alderman Wark.
Here, John.
Councillor Jason Barr. Councillor Jason Barr. Councillor Raymond Barr. Councillor Raymond Barr. Councillor John Boyle.
Here.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
No, John.
Councillor Burke.
And Shaw, John.
Councillor Carr.
John.
Councillor Cusack.
On way, John.
Councillor Dobbins. Councillor Dobbins. Councillor Donnelly.
And Shaw.
Councillor Doyle.
Here, John.
Councillor Duffy.
And Shaw.
Councillor Durkin.
Apologies.
Councillor Edwards.
John.
Councillor Farrell. Councillor Farrell. Councillor Ferguson.
Apologies.
Yes, sir. John, please.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming.
I'm sure, John.
Councillor Gallagher.
And Shaw, John.
Councillor Harkin.
Here.
Councillor Heaney.
And Shaw, John.
Councillor Jackson.
And Shaw.
Councillor Kelly.
And Shaw, John.
Councillor Logue.
John.
Councillor McGuire. Councillor McGuire. Councillor McHugh.
And Shaw, John.
Councillor McKeever.
Here, John.
Councillor McKinney.
Here, John.
Councillor Mellon.
And Shaw, John.
Councillor Mooney.
Here, John.
Councillor O'Neill.
Here, John.
Councillor Riley.
Here, John.
And Councillor Tierney.
Here.
Thank you, Mayor. Members, just running over a few that I may have missed. Alderman Hussey. Councillor Jason Barr. Councillor Raymond Barr. Councillor Cusack.
He's running late, John, but she will be joining us.
Okay. Councillor Dobbins. Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Is that Councillor Farrell?
It is. Yep.
Thank you. And Councillor McGuire.
John.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members.
Thank you, John. Members, item number 3 is a statement of remote meetings. I would like to remind everyone who is in remote attendance that this meeting will be broadcast live via the Council's YouTube channel and will also be available for viewing by the public and the media. This broadcast will also be available for repeated viewing at a later date. The broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with Council's protocol. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at a meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. By participating in this meeting, you are consenting to be filmed and to the use and storage of those film images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purposes of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. A copy of the Council's privacy notice may be found on the Council website at derrystrabane.com. Thank you, members. Members, item number 4 is a declaration of members' interests. Now, I'm not sure whether it's necessary that we have to do this, but we will take a note of all the members who are currently serving on the PCSP, rather than having an influx of messages on the chat facility, members. So if members are happy enough, we'll move on to, and John, if we can just mark Councillor Angela Dobbins and as attended here, please.
I see that. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Members, item number 5 is chairperson's business, and there's only one item, and that's to welcome Councillor Conor Heaney to his first council meeting. You're very welcome, Councillor Heaney, and I'm sure other members right across this virtual chamber look forward to working with you in the time ahead, and wish you well on your new role. Thank you. Thank you. Members, item number 6 is
Mayor,
our...
Mayor, sorry, can I come in? It's Alderman Kerrigan here. Apologies, I'm on the phone. I don't have the chat box facility. I just was looking to potentially just ask a question on the chairperson's business, if that's okay.
No, I'm sorry. There's a meeting next
okay.
Thursday. I'm trying to keep the Alderman Kerrigan, with the greatest respect, I'm trying to keep this meeting to the items of business. I'm making sure that we're here and we're concentrating on the work in hand. So if you don't mind, we can follow up on that with you at a later time.
Well, it was to do with the meeting, but that's okay. All right.
Thank you. Members, item number 6 is the reason for today's meeting. As you will be aware, I've been contacted by a number of you and asked to hold this special meeting, and that's the reason why we're here. But before we go into that, and I noticed that a few of you are already looking to come on, but before we go into it, can I just remind members that matters that are awaiting or are under adjudication in a court or a tribunal, whether they're relating to civil or criminal proceedings, whilst they may be referenced, should not be discussed in detail, as to do so may cause prejudice to those proceedings. And this would also apply, members, to proceedings under other judicial bodies, such as ombudsman's offices or regulators. And can I also just remind members that I believe that there's going to be a lot of interest in today's meeting. And, you know, we should be aware that our words here today can have actions and reactions in other places. And I would just remind members to please be mindful of their language whilst they're in the meeting. I think that's very, very important that we do that. I will be, in terms of the time limit, I'll be allowing some latitude on that. But I'm going to be clear, members. I'm not going to allow people that, if I feel that members are straying in the territory that I don't feel comfortable with, I will be stopping and moving on. Now, I notice a few indicated speakers. I've got Councillor Riley, Jackson, Burke, McKinney, and Councillor Raymond Barr. John has also just arrived, so I'll take them in the order that they've come into me, members, and I would appreciate that you work with me today as we step through this meeting. So calling Councillor Martin Riley first of all.
Okay, Mayor, thank you for bringing me in, and thank you to yourself for convening today's meeting. I understand and agree with what you said in relation to the fact that people should be conscious of their words, but also conscious that there is live investigations underway in relation to some of the incidents that have happened in recent days in the city. So without seeking to prejudice or interfere with those, as you have indicated, I do think it is important, though, that we note that these have happened and that there is concern across our city and district in relation to an incident in the Waterside area on Saturday night, and also wider incidences across the Waterside in recent weeks. We've had the police come under attack in a number of locations. We also have had police attacked outside of this council area, but nonetheless an attack since this meeting was called on a police officer and her young child, which has to be condemned and has to be pointed out that that in this chamber in recent weeks, we passed a motion in relation to strategies about violence against women and girls. And here we have an incident where a police officer faced an attack on her life and an attack on a child as well. So I think that we need to be conscious of all of that and be aware that this is an opportunity to speak against that type of violence and rightly indicate that this council does not support any such actions. Mayor, there's a duty of collective responsibility on us all to appeal for calm, but there's also a duty to hold the police to account and to point out when we see bad policing occur, and also to point out when we see good policing take place. There's been, as I said, a number of instances across our city and region whereby people have rightly been angered and concerned about policing operations. And therefore, Mayor, I've a proposal which I've shared with the council officers in advance of today's meeting, which I would be proposing here today. I think it is important that this council hear from police at the most senior level, and also from the likes of the police ombudsman and the human rights advisors that the policing board have in relation to how policing is being carried out in our district. There are other opportunities that people have. Our own party have met with the police and had conversations about all of this in recent days, and we continue to use our voice in the various places where we have a mandate to do that. But I think it would be appropriate that we try to bring the chief constable and the policing board to the chamber, albeit virtually, to raise with them directly the concerns that are out there in our city and district. So, Mayor, I'm going to put the proposal in the chat box, but as I said, I have emailed it through to officers in advance, and hopefully it will get the support of people in this virtual chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Riley, just before I get a seconder for your proposal, you will be aware, and I think you referenced it yourself in your own speaking notes. There already is a meeting in the diary, which has just been firmed up. Are you suggesting that we combine those two, or that we have two separate meetings?
Mayor, I'm happy to do that should my proposal be carried here this afternoon. I think that would be wise, that we combine the two if my proposal is passed here this afternoon. Thank you.
Yep, that's grand. Councillor Riley, thank you. And I note that Councillor John Boyle has seconded that proposal. Can we get the proposal on the screen for other councillors to see it in full, please? And whilst we're doing that, I'm going to call Councillor Christopher Jackson.
Thanks, Mayor. Mayor, I want to thank you for calling this meeting. I know there's, after the incident that happened on Saturday night in Topple Hill, there's been a lot of anger in our community, and this meeting gives us the opportunity to express that anger in a positive way. And I want to thank you for giving us that opportunity. I know you've outlined at the start of the meeting that there's ombudsman's investigations, and there's other investigations, and as a council we can't interfere or prejudice that in any way, and I completely agree. But Mayor, we can't ignore the fact that on Saturday night there was a vulnerable member of our community who phoned the police, asked for help, and consequently ended up getting shot. That's very difficult to comprehend, and that has led to widespread anger right across our council area. Mayor, and it would be, whilst I agree that it would be inappropriate for us to go into the detail and the further detail to the events on Saturday night in Topple Hill, it is only right to point out that this happened at a time when there had been repeated concerns around the aggressive attitude of some police officers when they're policing some parts of our city. And those concerns, in our view, we feel that they've been ignored. We've, as a party, we've had continuous meetings over many years, raising concerns around aggressive tactics that's used by the police. And I know other parties have done the same, and it is very frustrating that that those concerns have seemed to be swept onto the table. They've been ignored, and we haven't seen the changes to the police, to the policing that we believe our communities deserve. Mayor, after Saturday night, people are angry, and rightly so. In this area, the confidence in policing has been dealt a major blow, and there is an onus on the police service to try and restore, take steps to try and restore confidence and give people confidence that, at the very least, when somebody lifts the phone, they request for help, they're not going to be a victim themselves as a result of that. And I think that's a fundamental issue, and it needs to be addressed. That confidence needs to be restored. Mayor, another thing, because when we are talking about policing, I think it would be remiss of us not to touch on the fact that there is criminal gangs that are operating right across our city, and in our view, we have raised concerns both public and privately that there's a perception that there's in terms of some policing, or some elements of the police are unwilling to challenge these criminal gangs, and we have that has been led to almost a two-tier policing, particularly here in our city, and that's not acceptable, and that needs to change. And so in terms of the proposal that's been put in the floor by Councillor Riley, as a party, we're happy to support the proposal. We're happy to speak to anybody to help try and find a resolution and bring an end to the bad policing, the bad policing practices that we've been witnessing over many years in the city. We recognise and acknowledge that there are bodies that have a responsibility to oversee policing and to hold police to account. So it's only right for us as a council, if we're going to be challenging that and work towards a solution and a resolution, that we speak to those that are responsible. So, Mayor, as a party, we're happy to support the proposal, and I would hope that this meeting, as we move through this meeting, that we're going to work towards solutions, and we're not going to look for headlines and coming out of the back of this, because, as you said, Mayor, this is a very volatile situation. Our words will have and can have a big impact. So again, I would join you when we're calling for calm, and hope that this meeting allows those elected members to channel that anger in a more positive way and constructive way. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson, for that. Members, I suppose it was remiss of me at the beginning of this discussion not to, on your behalf and on behalf of this council, send our best wishes to the gentleman who was caught up in the incident on Saturday night, and also the lady and the young child that Councillor Riley has referenced just outside of our council district in the attempted attack yesterday. To send our best wishes to all of them, and hope that they make a very, very speedy recovery. Councillor Doyle with a point of clarification.
Sorry, Mayor, thanks. I just going back to what you said about correspondence. When you said there that there's already something on the books, is that the district commander is going to come in as a result of a motion I put forward recently? I just wasn't sure. Thanks, Mayor.
Yeah, that's what I referenced at the start, that there is already a proposal that has passed at last month's full council, I think it was, and officers are acting on that at the minute, and the Chief Executive will keep me right. I think that meeting is scheduled for the 19th of May, Councillor Doyle, and that date, right, John?
Mayor, we are working on finalising that date. It's
Right.
certainly penciled in
Yeah.
currently for the 19th, and the local chief superintendent has been invited to that date, but we're working to clear diaries, and it's not fully confirmed that it's that date yet, but we will advise members as soon as possible.
Yep. Thanks for that, John. I hope that clears that up for you, Councillor Doyle. But regardless of the date. I think the point still stands to Councillor Riley as he look at the tie those two meetings, regardless of the date under that. Councillor Tina Burke.
Thanks, Mayor, for letting me in. Just a few sort of brief things here. Obviously, heavy-handed policing, it's not acceptable in any community. And as a council, as we should, and we do, we should be condemning any incidents of this from happening. We've seen how the actions in many situations of the PSNI and how they impacted our communities. The area that I represent, but also live in Craigan, in recent times has seen many incidents of heavy-handed policing. I don't need to get into specifics as we've discussed it here in the chamber, and it's been widely shared on social and print media. But I would just like to make reference to the recent incidents which involved a woman being tackled to the floor, which was totally unacceptable. Nobody deserves that type of policing. And then obviously when we seen the awful situation that occurred over the weekend, which involved a vulnerable man who had called for help and then subsequently was shot in the chest. For me, again, it just highlighted how our communities and police are policed in terms of their response. The PSNI need to explain to this council and indeed the whole community their actions. None of it's acceptable. Another issue I just want to raise, and I think in terms of when we look at policing and how they approach our communities, is the volume of police and their presence when they're responding to incidents. Within Craigan, we see a situation many times where residents are left that they can't leave their homes. When we see a high number of jeeps or cars attending an incident, and then not to mention the boundary of further jeeps and cars, it basically disrupts the whole community. It's just not acceptable, and the impact that it's having on the wider community needs to be challenged each and every time these occur. These incidents, alongside any paramilitary activity, it's our communities who are suffering time and time again, and people within our communities who are left to pick up the pieces. Craigan and indeed all communities deserve proper policing, and they're being portrayed, and they're being portrayed recently as these areas that they aren't. No, it's complete. No, Craigan's portrayed in such a negative way, and the police need to take some responsibility for their role in that and how they approach incidents within the area. We all should, and as a party, we do challenge at every opportunity these incidents, because Craigan and indeed all communities deserve better. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor McKinney.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor, for letting me in. Councillor Ferguson and I are aware of the ongoing paramilitary activities in the area in recent weeks. Paramilitaries are the scourge in our society and offer nothing to our community other than hardship, intimidation, strife. We are aware of a number of incidents which there are questions raised about police response in recent weeks, and we fully agree that anyone who feels they were treated unfairly should report this to the Ombudsman. Myself and Councillor Ferguson have raised our concerns regarding recent paramilitary activity with the Chief Superintendent Jones. We are also aware that the family of the gentleman who was shot is looking to take actions of the police, and we are waiting to see the outcome of the Ombudsman report and think this should be open to all. We also have met with the Minister Long to discuss the actions being taken by her department to tackle paramilitaries in our city and district, and as we've seen a number of instances of people being shot in recent months. On behalf of the Alliance Party and Councillor Ferguson, I would like to reiterate that the PSNI have our full support and total confidence in their ability to police the area. We strongly encourage all members of the community to come forward with any information or they have in relation to the shooting of attempt on the PSNI officer's life. Again, we would like to reiterate the responsibility we as political leaders have to uphold the current legal statutory mechanism of redress open to the public or indeed councillors. We may wish to express dissatisfaction. Lastly, we would also like to thank the PSNI who risk their lives to ensure our communities are policed. Their work in recent cases has been further complicated by the attacks made on colleagues' life. No one should have to face the threats or intimidation carrying out their work. We have the utmost respect for anyone who places themselves in harm in order to ensure our safety and care for the community. We offer our support and well wishes to the officers who have been victim to horrendous attempts on their lives, and encourage this chamber to join us in standing in our support for the PSNI and the essential work to do. We feel it's deeply inappropriate for this council to call
Apologies, sorry. I'm reading the wrong notes. We have many initiatives running within the council area from the Department of Justice. There's a series of interventions focused on sport, enabling young people to engage positively with statutory services. We also have the RAP community participation and youth activity programmes, Education Authority START programme, women's programmes to move into leadership and programmes, youth work provision via the provision of detached youth work who provides mentors. The success of these initiatives relies substantially on political support and willingness to endorse. We have also been assured that a number of significant arrests have been made in relation to recent paramilitary activity. We are deeply concerned about the politicisation of the police action. Members, it is our duty to support the PSNI to uphold the rule of law, not to undermine their good work they're taking. We know that senior police officers, including Chief Superintendent Jones, and indeed all front facing are dedicated to engaging with the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKinney. Councillor Aileen Mellon.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting me in. Suppose I just, whilst this meeting is taking place around the policing in our communities, it would be remiss of me not to raise the issue that took place within our DEA Mayor on Easter Monday regarding a supposed security alert at Templemore Sports Complex or near there. I was on the ground that night alongside others working, and it has already been reported to the PSNI, as I have done, and we have done it through the community safety structures, that the actions and the reactions of the PSNI that night, in my opinion, were over the top and were unprofessional. For the security alert to start with, the cordon that went on and the length of time that was there, seeing people not being able to get out to their work, people couldn't get out to get their children food. We had to direct people over pathways to get out all our entrances, and people were rightly so. They were angry at the actions or the operation that went on. I wouldn't put it all to the one side and say that we condone any behaviour of petrol bombs or anything else that was thrown that night. But I would like to point out that there was limited amount of police in the area to start off with. There was a few petrol bombs that were thrown. They couldn't reach the police because of the area that they were there. So the police decided to bring the 9 Land Rovers and beside the young people, come out of their Land Rovers and line up, with one Land Rover actually attempting to drive at the young people. So in my opinion, and indeed many others that were there that night, firstly it was an odd security alert. I would put it down to that. Indeed, I know it's a go-to to blame young people on it to even start with, but in my experience, where the device was, the fact that the young people had no regular out, it was a very odd evening from the start to the end. And I did find that whenever the young people had no ammunition left, there was muck and things like that being thrown. It wasn't in a tent, there wasn't that serious of materials, and the 9 Land Rovers still persistent and staying, put on their sirens, they were laughing. And you know, we should have a wee bit more professionalism when they're coming into our areas. It did start off with a small group of young people, and as the more police arrived, the more young people arrived, and the audience grew bigger and bigger. I would like to point out that the audience that was there, some of the residents and myself and others, was left behind to clean up the area, and I know council came out shortly the next day and cleaned the rest of it, so I want to give my thanks there. And it does show you that there is community there is people who are dedicated to cleaning, you know, them residents that came out with their brushes, with the help, that they want to see change. They are frustrated, they're angry. The mother who had their newborn baby in the car, who had to go up through the pathways, it's not acceptable, Mayor. And for me, the 3 things that I would be annoyed at was the actions and the reactions of the police, the behaviours that went on that night, and the length of the cordon that it took and the length of time. It's completely unacceptable. I wouldn't see it in any other area, in my opinion, and other areas, sorry. And I do think that although I've already voiced these concerns, we do have good neighbourhood teams that we do work with the community structures down here in Ballyarnett, but we can't depend on a personality in policing to see what way we're going to get a reaction or what way it's going to roll out that night. It has to be systemic change, and it has to be changed within the whole police force, telling us that when the TSGs come, that there's nothing more that can be done in terms of community liaison and things like that. It's just unacceptable, and I don't think we should be willing to accept it within our DA or with anyone else. And that's my comments there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mellon. Councillor Sean Harkin.
Thank you, Mayor. And the first thing I'll say is thank you for agreeing to take up People Before Profits request with the support of all our parties and councillors to hold this meeting. And as you said, this is an important platform and that there will be interest. And I'm hoping that the PSNI are watching, which I'm sure they are, and they will hear very loudly and clearly what our concerns are and the concerns of our constituents and residents are in regard to recent policing. And obviously the trigger, I suppose, for calling this meeting was the shooting of a vulnerable man in Scale at the weekend. And I think all our councillors have said that there was a lot of frustration and anger about this, and I think that that's absolutely right. There really has been, and I think people expect to see a response coming from, coming from our council, and it is connected to other issues. I did expect to see a response. I didn't see any unity of purpose statement, which I know that they've been quick off the mark in the past, and it struck me that there wasn't, and it struck other people that there hadn't been a unity of purpose statement sent out in regard to that and other matters that I'll mention. Look, we're going to talk about policing tonight, but we have to look at the broader context. I think it's very clear that politics at Stormont is polarised right now, and that there are political parties who are riling things up, causing division and causing a tremendous amount of tension, and that is having an impact on policing. Philip just said there about upholding the rule of law, and I'm sure the DUP will be on here soon to tell us that we have to uphold the rule of law, and they are very much the loudest law and order party in the chamber. But I think it's clear to a lot of people they been behind disorder over recent weeks. So I think we have to also call out this kind of hypocrisy where police officers have been targeted and injured and sent to hospital because of that disorder, and that needs to be looked at, and I'm sure people can see that. But the situation in Godna Scale isn't alone. I mean, look, there's a lot of questions here. I know there's an investigation, but the first thing for me is, why are the police turning up to a situation that is a mental health issue? This should not be a policing matter. It should be led by.
Harkin, just give me 1 wee second, please. There's someone typing there as you're speaking, and it's interference. So whoever it is, can you put your mic on mute, please? Thank you. Apologies, Councillor Harkin. Go ahead.
No problem, Mayor. So, to my mind, it shouldn't have been led by the PSNI. They should not be turning up at the house of a vulnerable adult who's calling out for help. In so many instances, this is where we see people who are not trained to deal with this kind of situation respond with violence. And fortunately, in this situation, somebody didn't end up dead, but they very almost could have been killed. So I think that's one of the issues, but this is not the only issue. That's a police and matter problem. This council's talked at length about the abuse and violation of people's civil rights and human rights at the Black Lives Matter protests, where there was a crackdown, as everybody knows, right across the north by the PSNI, and people's have been completely vindicated in their in the criticisms that were raised about that. But the fines still haven't been dropped. The prosecutions still haven't been dropped. There's still no apology issued to the BAME community. Not only that, look, we've seen in Craigan recently, 20 police Land Rovers turning up, a woman being thrown to the ground, and multiple police officers on top of her. And so that's a violation, and I don't think that there was enough speaking out by people who are often on the front foot about all our issues very loudly. But it's not just about the one individual. I mean, people we've talked to in that community feel absolutely criminalised. They feel like people in Craigan are being demonised, and that this is, and often you get this kind of thing in the media where when there's an explanation for a heavy-handed policing incident in Craigan or Galia, it's because there's trouble in Galia, and it's as if the problem is all the people in those areas. And I think that the PSNI has to take that on board, that they are playing a role in making people feel criminalised, much broader than the people they might be targeting. So this is a serious, serious problem. I also believe that we have long-standing issues in our district and our society with policing, but the pandemic has really put a spotlight on it. Be it what's happened in Craigan, what's now happening in Gardenscale, Black Lives Matter, but the kind of targeting of students and the demonisation of students who are soft targets when people who are powerful or politically connected are left untouched in terms of COVID violations. I mean, everybody can see through this hypocrisy, and then the police are at the centre of doing this. So there's so many instances, I think, that there is a broader concern about how policing is being conducted, and about how Stormont is actually creating a lot of the division and the context in which all this is happening. So I think that this is a message has to go out to the PSNI that these types of actions, selective policing, violence, brutality against people, criminalisation of communities is completely unacceptable. Look, in terms of the motion, I think that the motion is redundant since we've already agreed to that at previous meetings. I think that the message from the council has to be that these actions are unacceptable and are actually going to create more problems and more issues for people living in our communities. And the last thing I'll say is, look, there is a broader context. I mean, there is movements all around the world against police brutality. I'm sure people seen the other day that a police officer in the US was found guilty of killing George Floyd, and that was a surprise to many people. Wouldn't have happened without the protests that happened around the world, and including Derry, where there's a bit of justice there. But there is an issue about policing. I've seen a police officer in England just retired saying that money shouldn't be going to the police. It should actually be going to fighting poverty, and this is the best way to address many of the issues in our communities. So I think for us, we have to, as a council, begin to try and send the message that in situations like Gardenscale, what we don't need is the police arriving with a strategy of guns out. That we actually need a strategy that is medical, health-led, with professionals who are actually in a position to deal with a vulnerable individual turning up at the front door. And in situations like that, we won't have people killed, we won't have people brutalised, and we won't have people, near death, as the poor fellow in Gardenscale was the other night. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. You touched a wee bit there, Councillor Harkin, on the two proposals, one from Councillor Riley and one from Councillor Doyle at our last meeting. Just to point out, there's a very distinctive difference. Councillor Riley's one today is to invite the Chief Constable, representatives of the Policing Board, and the human rights advisors as well. So there's a clear difference in those two proposals, just to be clear on that, Councillor Harkin. But thanks very much for your comments. Next is Councillor Michaela Boyle.
Mayor, thank you. Mayor, I'm happy to keep my comments to the end as it's not attributed to the Derry incident, but I just want to comment on another incident that happened in our district at the weekend that involved a serious assault of a young girl. So I'm happy to keep those comments to the very end.
if that's what you want to do, Councillor Boyle, that's fine. I would never separate an incident in Derry and Strabane, but if you're happy enough to keep it, this is to be concentrating this discussion, I'm happy enough to
just
take
to
it that
keep
way.
to keep it free flowing. Thank you,
Yep,
Mayor.
no problem. Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Councillor Gary Donnelly.
Thank you. And thanks to people before profit with comedy and your permittance to bring this up. Chair, it was always building up to this. No doubt in my mind, you know, what's happened in Craigan has been touched on, where a number of vulnerable children were assaulted, you know, and we've had all these conversations. 2 women assaulted, manhandled. What in the last meeting, you know, I brought it up that the PSNI during the raid in Craigan were boasting and goading people and showing off their automatic weapons. You know, this macho image, this was always going to happen. And the reason why it happened is because there was no sanctions. Even from people that think that the PSNI should be reformed or British policing should be reformed, they offer no sanctions whatsoever. What they do is that they say, oh, we'll meet, we'll go into Strabane barracks and we'll talk to them, but nothing happens. And that's what this motion is going to do, Chair. We're asking these people to come into council and explain themselves. These are the same people who were involved in the cover-ups, the arrest of journalists for Loughlin Island for collusion. You know, there needs to be stronger action taken, even from people who have a reformist attitude. Now, people are expecting answers from chief constables or our members of the PSNI. I've spoken at length today on a number of occasions to Kieran Shields from Madden and Finucane Solicitors, who represents the man that was shot. He has been constantly trying over the last 72 hours to contact the PSNI of the detective inspectors, sergeants, sending emails, they catch all emails within the police service, PSNI, and they haven't even returned the call. They haven't even acknowledged. So he's sitting with a client who he doesn't have any contact. There's no clarification, even if his client has been charged with attempted murder. This is a very vulnerable individual who basically doesn't have access to legal representation. Even by PSNI standards, they have torn up the rule book here. So, you know, if people seriously expect them to come into this council, Chair, and give answers, then they're either very deluded or naive or part of just accepting it rather than rock the boat. It's completely wrong. There's a number of questions, Chair. There's a considerable amount of anger. I spoke to a member of this man's family, and I spoke to people within the community. There is an awful lot of questions that need answered. I know we can't go into it in details, but having spoke to a number of people, there's very, very serious concerns regarding this. And these type of things, Chair, will continue. They're going to get worse unless people take some type of stance and some type of action. Now, I do have a proposal, but I put it in when you can inform me when's the proper place to put it in. It's not connected to the one that we have at the minute. So if you could let me know, I could put that on. But if people are concerned about human rights and civil liberties, then they should be shouting and roaring as why this vulnerable individual who came within an inch of losing his life isn't even allowed legal representation. That's where people need to be going with this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. You're saying that you have a proposal and it's not, you're not offering it as an amendment to Councillor Riley's. So once we deal with Councillor Riley's proposal, I'll come back to you then, Councillor Donnelly, all right? Okay, thank you. Alderman McClintock.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting me in. Thank you at the beginning for your reminder about being very careful and that we moderate our language to be today, to be aware of the consequences of our words. I've said before in this virtual chamber that there is undoubtedly an issue with confidence in the PSNI at this moment, and that goes throughout the entire area. And that's across the incidents in the water side and the incidents that have been in the city side for some time as well. But I do recognise there is a great difficulty balancing numbers of PSNI responding to calls, no matter where that might be. And I suppose I look forward to a response from senior officers as to what the rationale is for so many sometimes attending incidents, which undoubtedly can inflame situations. I suppose I do offer my best wishes to all caught up in all the incidents, and that's civilians and PSNI officers as well. I think it's important, and I don't want to go into any detail, obviously, on the Governor scale incident, but I think it's so important that we don't make any judgments without full information. There's two sides to every incident, and not wanting to go into that in any way, but there was a man and a police officer who could have been seriously injured or dead today. But I think we need to get back as a society to get back to a situation where we can fully support our PSNI, who do a very difficult job. And we all know that when there is a vacuum or a loss of confidence in the PSNI, and we've seen in the past what happens in that sort of a vacuum, there are certainly issues causing great frustration within all sections of our community, and those are definitely evident within the PUL community at this present time. The answer to these is never violence, nor wrecking your own community, but we need to be in a situation where we can fully support our PSNI in very difficult situations that they find themselves in. And I think that the notice of motion brought forward by Councillor Riley today is a very sensible one, and I think a good way forward, because we do need to hold our PSNI to account and also to hear from them firsthand, because it's easy to sit here and to slate them and to say things about them, but we need to actually hear things from their side as well. So we will be happy to support Councillor Riley's notice of motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman McClantic. Next two speakers are Councillor Gallagher and Councillor Raymond Barr. Can I just double check before I come to you if you're on the same issue as Councillor Michaela Boyle was, or you want to talk about the entire piece? Councillor Gallagher.
I'll talk about the entire.
Yep, go ahead.
This meeting is about policing. Is that correct, Mayor? Yes?
Yeah, go ahead. Yep, I'm happy for you to go ahead. I just wanted to double check.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, Mayor, I have an amendment that I'll put into the chat box and stuck it in there to go on the end. And Mayor, and I can appreciate some of those parties that wish to want to bring this motion, but like other speakers, this council going to speak to the Chief Constable, or going to speak to the policing board or their human rights advisors. I think that once we still have dark forces that are controlling policing, the police constable's hands as being chief of the police, they're tied. They're controlled. He doesn't have the power that people expect him to have as a chief constable, because he's operating under the control of MI5. And MI5, and we all know it, and we've known it for years, never mind weeks, for years in this district council area, how MI5 have manipulated and controlled policing at a deeply, deeply heavy price to our communities. And if these people are coming to this chamber of council, they need to be coming without the controlling powers that MI5 have over them. And we as a council, if we're going to influence them, need to tell them that they get the monkey off their backs, which is MI5. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Members, I'll just note that Councillor Sean Carr has seconded the amendment from Councillor Gallagher in the chat box. Councillor Raymond Barr.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Barr, are you on the entire piece, or the same issue as Councillor Michaela Boyle?
It's supposed to do with general policing in Strabane, but I will be touching on that. Yep. That Michaela mentioned as well.
Yep, Grant, go ahead.
I've been asked by residents in Strabane to raise the issue of inadequate general policing in Strabane. It's got to the stage where residents feel they're being expected to police antisocial behaviour themselves. I know there's groups and voluntary agencies who are monitoring and patrolling the Strabane area at the weekends and who are no longer doing this because of a lack of funding. And I also know the problems that exist in relation to social and economic deprivation with our youth. And I applaud the efforts of the local agencies who are working to alleviate this problem. But on the interim, residents are suffering. I'll give an example. At the request of residents living in 3 flashpoint areas, a few months ago, I arranged 2 meetings with the PSNA. The feedback from those 2 meetings was so negative that when the PSNA requested a 3rd meeting, none of the residents wanted to attend. And what people feared, but a lot of people predicted, happened last weekend when a young girl was brutally attacked, knocked unconscious, videoed and humiliated by a gang of youths, spitting on her, videoing her when she lay unconscious. No, to me, this incident was a direct result of the lack of policing in Strabane, especially at the weekends. There are young people in Strabane every weekend engaging in drinking and drug taking, and some of these youngsters that we're talking about are 13, 14 years of age. The incident last weekend was bad. It was really bad. But I feel that unless there's something done very soon, supposed to come down the line, we're talking about very serious injury or possibly a death. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barr. Members, there's a few on the list here, but it's been touched on now in relation to the incident that Councillor Boyle wanted to raise. So I'm going to go back to Councillor Boyle now, as opposed to running this on a little bit. Councillor Michaela Boyle.
Thank you, Mayor. Obviously, I too want to send my solidarity to the person that was involved in the incident in Derry and Scale, and also to the young girl who was viciously assaulted at the weekend in Strabane. Elected representatives, Mayor, we do whatever we can and whatever is necessary within our own communities to support agencies and families throughout the community, particularly when it comes to policing matters. It's probably one of the many issues on a regular weekly basis that I get contacted on is on policing matters. But over the past year or more, I think it's safe to say that a lot of the issues that I've been dealing with are the COVID-related incidences around antisocial behaviour, like Councillor Barrs just spoke about. What I'm hearing on the ground is where are the police? You know, they have a role, a duty, and a responsibility to the community also, and at times they're non-existent. I contact the neighbourhood policing team on a regular basis, probably on a weekly basis, with some issue. I've been told they're on the ground, they're doing this, they're doing that, whatever. But that's not the reflection of what is happening on the ground throughout Strabane in particular. When I'm hearing it from families and communities who are saying, you know, we're not seeing policing on the ground. I totally concur with the issues around what has manifested throughout our communities as a result of lockdown, and what that does to our young people, particularly their mental health and how it affects them. But that doesn't give them the right to attack viciously individuals within their peer groups. So young people also need to take responsibility for their behaviour. PSNI need to take responsibility for their non-action of people continuing to sell alcohol and drugs to our young people. This, as Councillor Raymond Barr has said, what happened last weekend in Strabane could have been fatal. And I just want to send, again, my solidarity to the young girl, and I hope she recovers very well, like the man in the waterside and God on the scale also. But the behaviour of what happened does need to be called out for what it was. It was a vicious assault on a young woman, on a girl. And, you know, people talk about it being antisocial behaviour. There may have been antisocial behaviour prior, after, whatever, but this was a serious, vicious assault, and it needs to be called out for what it was. I know there are a lot of groups and a lot of organisations across the district that are doing many different things for young people, you know, and there's a lot of funding out there also for our young people to get involved in different activities and different things. And hopefully when we come out of complete lockdown, that all of those things will be able to re-engage with our young people and a lot of the intervention programs that are out there for them. But I don't believe throwing money at things will change. We need things that are happening now in terms of antisocial behaviour are transgenerational issues. And we need to get to the root of that and to the heart of it and address it. I'm not one for saying, you know, for putting the blame on parents, but parents need to take a responsibility also. I'm a parent, we're all parents. We all know it's very, very difficult to be a parent, particularly in this day and age. But we need to be mindful of where our children are, what they're up to, who they're engaged with, what they're engaged in. And we have to be very mindful of those within our communities that are controlling our young people, that are selling them the alcohol and selling them the drugs. And I do believe that the police need to be coming down heavy on those individuals also. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Councillor Boyle, can I also just join with you and Councillor Bard and others to send my best wishes to the young lady who was involved in that incident in Strabane. I've heard from colleagues about it, and it was despicable, the behaviour that went on there. But just on behalf of this council, to send our best wishes to her and hope that she makes a speedy recovery also. Alderman Darren Guy. Sorry, just before we go to Alderman Guy, is there a seconder for the amendment from Councillor Gollard? Oh, sorry, Sean Carr did it. My apologies, members. Alderman Guy.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting me in. Look, I'll start. I'll keep this bit short. So I just want to start off by talking about the Saturday night's events in Gavnaskeel, and going back to what Councillor Jackson says there, and I agree. Those people in that area have a right to be angry. It's completely understandable. As far as I'm aware, both Meal and police officer are recovering, which is good. I wish them both a speedy recovery, as well as the young girl in Strabane. I didn't know about that, but I hope that she recovers fully. In our own predominantly Protestant areas within the waterside, we witnessed 7 nights of violence over 8 days, 8 nights, sorry, on the lead up and the run over Easter weekend. I witnessed real bad on a Thursday and Friday night. It was really, really bad, to the point I hadn't witnessed violence like that in Protestant areas since 95, 96. That's how long ago it was. And on that, we had one male arrested, numerous police officers injured, and vehicles burned, sustained petrol bomb attacks, and masonry and fireworks thrown at the police lines. Look, I'm not going to go over the reasons. They're well rehearsed, but there is a lot of anger as well in the unionist community at the minute towards policing. They talk of two-tier policing. They talk of local policing in their area not being right. Now, I was, along with my party colleagues, attended a meeting with the Chief Constable, Simon Byrne, and I brought up the matters. I brought up these matters to him. I told him what had happened in the city over those 7 nights. I told him about the police. Now, I will back the police whenever I feel that the police need backed. They do a thankless job, let's say, often used as the sponge between the two communities. But I will call them out when they do wrong. And I can see and I understand the anger in community and Protestant and Unionist communities within the Waterside and further afield. And things that have happened, policing issues and so on, has led to a loss of confidence and trust for many in the Unionist community. And this has partly manifested itself in some of the recent disorder that we have witnessed. And I stress, like Chief Constable, that a great deal of work remains to be done to rebuild relationships, partnerships and confidence in local policing. And that's right across the board. And I think we all have to work together to that. You know, I know that people talk about rhetoric and all. There's been a lot of rhetoric. I don't want to go into anything, but there's a lot of rhetoric thrown about. Before the Northern Ireland Protocol came in, after the Northern Ireland Protocol came in, we're all responsible. We all have to keep level-headed, because that feeds down through our communities, and it's the young people who will end up with convictions and all if we don't show a bit of, you know, just let's keep a lid on this sort of thing. And I understand tensions are high, people are angry, but violence isn't the way forward. And I'll just finish it there. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Guy. Councillor Emmett Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting me on. Firstly, can I just say some of the contributions here tonight have been fantastic. Some of the most respectful debate I've heard, and level-headed debate I've heard in this council since I joined it, and it's great to see. I know the family of the gentleman injured, Mayor, and I won't go into a lot of it because I know about the sub judice requirements. But look, what has to be clear here is that this, like Sean Harkin said, is a much wider issue. You know, people expect that there is a process in life to be followed, and in this respect, when it comes to policing, people expect it to be done a certain way, and that there will be justice at the end of the tunnel for victims. But what we're actually seeing now, and this is symptomatic of some of the anger that's out there, is that we have investigations taking years for crimes. We have investigations by the police ombudsman taking years when it comes to inappropriate and dangerous policing practices. You know, we've just celebrated. Well, no, actually, I won't go into that. I was down in Dove Gardens last week, I think it was, when there was a young fella shot in the community, and a lot of young people about, and absolutely no bad feeling at all. There was lots of police there, more than I think there should have been. But at one time, Mayor, a lot of young people who were doing no harm were standing outside Dove House, and at the entrance to Dura Park, 4 Land Rovers more or less hemmed them in to a very small area. And myself, and there were 2 young youth workers there too, who I have to give credit to. And one of the young fellas, he's 16 years of age. I'd known his family my whole life. And I said to him, look, just head on home. There's going to be hassle here, whatever else. And he turned to me and he says, I'll never forget it. They hit us. They must do. And he was talking about the police. And that's a very serious indictment of where we are in this city and beyond with policing. You know, I had mentioned to you, Mayor, and I understand your response, that I wanted to talk about tasers because of this incident in Gobnascale. You know, the police every year get, you know, I think at the minute it's over 32 million for so-called security funding, and yet tasers, there's only 1 for every 23 police officers. So, you know, while there's no excusing what was done in Gobnascale and other places where firearms have been used, the police need to look at their attitude to violence. Because if they're favouring arms, like Gary mentioned about Balmagowan, where they're able to show off automatic weapons. That's a very serious psychological problem that the police have. Now, look, I mean, we talk about community confidence in the policing service that is provided. They are communities, and I mean that both in my community and in the Protestant Unionist and Loyalist community, because I know, speaking to colleagues and I suppose the other side of the fence, that their young people in particular also feel exactly the same way. And yet that is because there's been a failure to deliver on the policing system that was promised years ago. You know, we were told that it was going to be a new start. I'm not going to get into the politics of it, but that's what we were promised. We were promised a new start for so many aspects of the society that we lived in, and they've never materialized. You know, and I understand that there is different ways to address some of these issues, and you know, meetings with the police, some parties and some individuals might feel that that's the appropriate way to do it. That's up to them, but we have to look at how that impacts on the community, because if outside of this, if something was to affect me around policing, and I said to my local representative who went and spoke to the police, and I saw no change, as a normal man on the street, I would think, well, the police obviously don't care. There's not, you know, if they're not listening to the person that I went to, my representative, then surely, you know, the feeling out there in the community is that they're not susceptible to be talked to, and you know that impunity, and it is impunity, is in the culture almost of the PSNI over this last number of years in particular. And it has now, you know, whether it has come from the fact that there's impunity at Stormont for so many things, we'll never know. But look, you know, time is running out, Mayor, and you know, I can't remember who it was that said it, just in one of the contributions earlier, but I wrote down here, there's a real sense of doom, sense that something is going to happen if there isn't a change. And you know, I have to say, Mayor, from a personal perspective, one of the things that really annoyed me over the last number of days and weeks was, you know, I saw people out on the ground in the waterside, Hillary and Gary Middleton and Darn and others, and Graham Workham as well. And I've seen people on the ground on this side of the community as well, from all different walks of life, political persuasions and everything else. But do you see, if I see one more politician tweeting about an incident or having a ready-made statement that just seems to be plugged out with the street name almost just changed on it, that's not leadership, Mayor. That is not leadership. And I'm not going to name names or anything else, but people need to see their political leaders on the ground. And I understand that's not everyone's bag, that not everybody's going to go down to a police cordon and talk to the residents of the police, and look, that's all right. But there has to be a message to the PSNI coming from this council. There does have to be some form of, I think Gary mentioned, you know, a consequence or a, you know, some sort of output. And look, I'm not a big fan of the police. I've grew up that way, and you know, they haven't done anything to gain my confidence. But as a member of this council, I have to say, the PSNI are putting people like me in a corner, because there is only so many times that I can go and speak to residents and speak to young people and say, look, they're only doing their job, or look, don't be throwing that stone. Because do you see, if a 16-year-old is able to say to me, they hit us and they must do, then I don't know how far down the line we've gone, and I don't know how far down the line we have yet to go. But this sense of doom that members on the feel across this chamber when it comes to policing, that something is going to happen, is the term that people use, then we're really in a very dangerous situation. And I have no doubt that every speaker here so far and in the rest of the night will be very sincere in what they've said. The police need to do that too. You know, look, I know people have very closely held principles when it comes to police and talking to them and all the rest. I get that. But the police need to be very clear that if they come in here and talk to us, that they have to not only listen, they would have said. They have to act on it, because if they walk out of
Councillor Doyle, can I ask you bring your remarks to a
yeah,
close, please?
no problem, I'm almost finished. If they walk out of this chamber, whether it be the chief constable or the district commander, and don't change, then we have to ask, what action can we take next to represent the people that we do? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Alderman Devaney.
Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me in. And I've spoken earlier on at earlier meetings in regarding to the issues and troubles and around the waterside that happened probably over a week ago now, and condemned it outrightly. And I did put on record that we had our representatives on the ground during that. But I have to say, Mr. Mayor, in around the PSNI, so our party has always stated that we will hold them to account. And look, at the end of the day, I believe the proposal here by Councillor Riley is timely. It's a very fitting one where we can get them around the table and question them. And you know, the PSNI have a very, very difficult, so damned if you do and damned if you don't, because you know, when we see when they find weapons belonging to dissidents, we're praising them, and when they go out and find drugs that are causing serious problems within our communities, we're applauding them. And you know, other than these issues here, where yes, some people feel aggrieved and something has gone wrong, I have to say, you know, talking to some of the public, many of the public out there, you know, they do a good job. They do a good job. But it's only on these issues here and around where their concern is. And look, the issue and around the top of the hill, at the end of it, I don't have all the details on it. All I know was that one person was injured by a shot. But we must also remember there was a PSNI officer injured. I don't know whether he was slashed or stabbed or whatever.
Careful, Boris, careful.
Yes, and I'm being careful now, Mr. Mayor. Others have been maybe a wee bit over the edge that I would thought, but and around that. But I have to say, look, at the end of the day, you know, we complain about the police. When we look at the serious pressure that's under policing at the moment, and I hear about the issues and around the Craigan, Mayor, and look, I have all appreciation for the people of the Craigan, but when the PSNI, we applaud them when they find weapons, and we call on them many times to clamp down on dissidents, Republican activity. But when the police go to carry out their roles, you know, investigating and doing house raids and stuff like that there, I'm listening to complaints here about the volume of Land Rovers, and you know, really sometimes we don't know who the person they're going to arrest is, how violent they may be, or what, you know, what circumstances may come out of that. So I have to say that police, you know, have a really, really difficult time. And Mr. Mayor, when we look back at the Laura McKee murder, if that had been a police officer, would there been, you know, as many meetings about it? And if the PSNI officer in Dungiven, if that threat from dissidents had murdered that PSNI officer and her child, and what was proclaimed to be a fireball, would there be as much concern about it? I don't think there would be. But I have to say, I do believe that the proposal here by Councillor Riley is the right one. But on the amendment, Chair, or Mayor, our party will not be supporting the amendment. Just to clarify that on the amendment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Devaney. Councillor Jackson on the amendment.
Thanks, Mayor. And I suppose in relation to the amendment, we're happy to support the amendment. We agree with the amendment. I suppose, listen, everybody speaking today, it's easy to recognise that there's a severe lack of confidence in the PSNI. And I suppose if we're going to move forward and trying to build confidence, or if the PSNI are to build confidence within our community and within this district, there can't be any role for MI5. And that's so if we're going to move on that basis, move forward, policing needs to be transparent. People need to have trust in it. And if there's a control and influence of the police by MI5, it's very difficult for anybody to have confidence in that police force. And although we support the amendment, and we will support the amendment, I have to point out that I am a bit disappointed as well, because I know there's many things that would divide us within this chamber, this virtual chamber. One of the things that I would hope that would unite us all is how it is completely unacceptable that anybody who calls and seeks assistance ends up being a victim. And I think that's a fundamental principle that we should be discussing today, is that that the aggressive nature of the police response has resulted in somebody who asked for help getting shot. Just picking up on some of the points that were made earlier, Mayor, and I know particularly the point that around Councillor Doyle's point around tasers. I don't agree with him because I believe that tasers have been proven to be a lethal force themselves, and I do believe in it in this instance and Saturday night that a taser could have proved to be fatal. But I think that's something that the policing board need to. Those are questions that need to be put to the policing board. They need to be taking those decisions, and I think that's something that, as in the back of this motion, I would hope that it's questions that this council could put to those representatives of the policing board. Just finally, Mayor, as somebody who has been on the ground over the past weekend, and as somebody who is on the ground on a nightly basis, I believe that that we've a major there's an onus on us all in terms of trying to keep things calm, but there's also some we're being challenged because there's a lot of anger within the community and a lot of distrust within the police service, and I think that's something that the police have to come out, and there needs to be that level of accountability. They need to come out and speak forward to the electorate, particularly the people of our district who feel hurt by the actions of the police. So I'm hoping that the outcome of this motion will give those police PSNI representatives the platform to explain the actions of their officers and answer some of the questions that our electorate have been asking for such a long time. So, but in relation to the amendment, Mayor, we're happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor John Boyle.
Thank you, Mayor. I was simply coming in with a query in relation to the amendment and seeking guidance from officers who are experienced in these particular matters, and it's really just to identify whether the amendment places more emphasis than on the original motion. It strikes me that they're perhaps two different motions, Mayor, and on the basis of the advice coming back to us, then then the SDLP will comment on the amendment, should it be an amendment, or if indeed it's felt that it's an entirely different motion. So if we can just get to that point. Just one other point as well is obviously it's our ambition in proposing this motion that we will have the Chief Constable and the Chair of the Policing Board and the Human Rights Advisors in, and an awful lot of, I'm sincerely hoping that this isn't an echo chamber here today, because I would envisage that an awful lot of what's being said here today will be said to them when, or indeed if, they agree to accede to our request. But in the first instance, Mayor, can we identify whether this is an appropriate amendment?
Yep, thank you, Councillor Boyle. Philip, are you online?
Chair, yes, thanks, Mayor. I am indeed. Mayor, it's a very finely balanced one. It's clearly in and around the issue of policing, which is what the subject of the meeting is. probably on balance, my view would be that it probably should have been taken or should be taken separately as a separate motion, because it does seem to be on a slightly different topic. One is a request for people to call in, and one is in relation to controlling powers of PSNI. So they're different, perhaps potentially slightly different topics, but I have to say, Chair, it's a very finely balanced issue, and I think it could be called either way by you, Chair.
Thanks for that, Philip. Thank you, Councillor Boyle. I hope that answers it. Now, as Philip has said, it's a very fine line. I would have slight concerns around it myself. So in that instance, I'm going to take the amendment as a separate proposal to this meeting. We've already had the debate on it. When we come back to it, we'll just be taking that as a proposal as opposed to an amendment to the proposal, and we'll be dealing with Councillor Riley's first of all.
We obviously haven't contributed from our party in relation to the amendment. However, I'm content to outline some of that, if you want.
Go ahead.
I mean, we have no particular issue with the amendment if it stands on its own as a separate proposal. I want to make that very clear, because we in the SDLP, we worked very long, very hard to ensure that we ended the force within a force, if you like, which would have been branded as the old special branch, and getting intelligence policing on a completely new basis. And things have significantly moved on from that, but they haven't moved on in what we would have considered a particularly positive way, because effectively what we've seen now is a bypassing and an undermining, which has had ulterior intelligence policing operations which have continued, and in a sense they are actually completely unaccountable. So I suppose that'll save us having to come back for our contribution, Mayor, but to indicate that when the amendment is proposed as a motion on its own right, that the SDLP will be content to support that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Can we have the second paragraph, which is in red, removed from the screen, so as we're not confusing people as we go forward, and store it so that it's easy got to whenever we're coming back to vote on that proposal. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Gallagher, I'll bring you in. I'm assuming it's on that proposal, and I'll bring you in due course when we get to that actual proposal. Thank you. Alderman Derek Hussey.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mayor. And clear at the beginning, I can support the proposal as it now sits. And I would emphasise to people the last few words in that particular motion. It's on public policing concerns in the district. Although the catalyst has obviously been very recent events to this, I would remind all that there are policing issues throughout the district which are not maybe necessarily of the nature that have. Indeed, listening tonight, I mean, we've heard of over policing in some areas, and similarly a lack of policing in others. And whilst undoubtedly there remain serious security concerns, what is really needed is an extension of good neighbourhood policing. And there are good examples, and people have referred to that as we've had this debate. But there are good examples, but they're not enough. We need more good neighbourhood policing. We need to reinstill that respect for police officers, police personnel on the ground, and indeed the development of a familiarity with your local bobby. And it's that sort of scenario which can help diffuse a lot of the instances that do occur. I mean, like other representatives, I've been in those situations where, which were difficult situations. And initially, you're dealing with the local officers, and then suddenly those others appear on the scene, and I can only refer to them as Robocops. They appear and, who are you guys? Can I speak to somebody? No, get you back out of the road. I think Councillor Doyle sort of referred to that type of attitude. But, dealing with your local neighbourhood sergeant, with the local neighbourhood team, with the police personnel on the ground that we all know, and they know us, can diffuse many a situation. Unfortunately, situations are developing, and I suppose you could say there's a growing lack of trust acting in the service, not in police officers on the ground, but in the service. And much of it I would put down to inadequate response and inappropriate response, as has being highlighted, particularly, and I have to go to policing concerns in the district, particularly in our rural areas, where response times and response at all, if you get it, can be very patchy. So, and I mean, that boils down, I suppose, to inadequate manpower, and much of that, has existed since the pattern reforms. And within the pattern reforms, there were projected numbers of police officers that would be required. We're sitting in a situation where those numbers are not there. There is a shortage of manpower, and that is something that has to be addressed. But very happy with the motion as it is, and let's bring that to the Chief Constable, and I would trust that local senior officers would agree they could do with more men and women to be operational on the ground, and indeed to the chair of the policing board, and re-emphasise that point. If we expect our police service to do a job, they must be properly resourced. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. Members, there's no further indicated speakers on this proposal from Councillor Riley, which has been seconded by Councillor Boyle. So I'm going to ask Councillor Riley to sum up before we go to a vote. Councillor Riley.
Yeah, Mayor, thanks for bringing me back in. And I think others have said, and can I echo what people have indicated in relation to the conduct of this debate and the tone of it. I think has been very measured and appropriate given the circumstances that has happened in the council area over recent weeks. So thank you everyone for commenting to today in relation to it, and thanks also to everybody, not just for their comments here in this virtual chamber, but out on the streets over the recent weeks. I've talked to many fellow elected representatives, my colleague Sean Mooney and others from across the various different political parties in the Waterside on the ground over recent nights and over the Easter holidays in relation to all that was going on, and all that the efforts that people were making to try and calm things down and to keep everyone safe. So thanks, Mayor, for allowing me back in to sum up, and the proposal on the floor now speaks for itself. I hope people support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. At this point, members, I'm going to ask the Chief Executive to take us through the vote, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Alderman Devaney.
For.
Alderman Guy.
For.
Alderman Hussey.
For.
Alderman Carrigan.
For.
Alderman McClintock.
For.
Alderman Wark.
For.
Councillor Raymond Barr.
John.
Sorry, Councillor Barr.
For.
Thank you. Councillor John Boyle.
For.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
For.
Councillor Burke.
For.
Councillor Carr.
Abstain.
Councillor Cusick.
For.
Councillor Dobbins.
For, John.
Councillor Donnelly.
Against.
Councillor Doyle.
For, John.
Councillor Duffy. Councillor Duffy. Councillor Edwards.
For, John.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Councillor Fleming.
For, John.
Councillor Gallagher,
Abstain.
Councillor Harkin,
Against.
Councillor Heaney,
For, John.
Councillor Jackson,
For, John.
Councillor Kelly,
For, John.
Councillor Logue,
For.
Councillor McGuire, Councillor McHugh, Councillor McHugh, Councillor McKeever,
For.
Councillor McKinney,
For, John.
Councillor Mellon,
For, John.
Councillor Mooney,
For, John.
Councillor O'Neill,
Against, John.
Councillor Riley,
For, John.
Councillor Tierney, and I
For.
see two other votes in there, Mayor. Councillor Jason Barr is for, and Alderman David Ramsey is also for.
Yep.
Thank you. Mayor and members, just give me a moment, please. Mayor, I have recorded 29 for, 3 against, and 2 abstentions, so the motion passes.
Thank you, John. Members, thank you. That motion from Councillor Riley has passed. Can I ask that we have the proposal from Councillor Gallagher on screen, please? And I will come to Councillor Donnelly and Councillor Harkin in due course, who have informed me that they've got separate proposals. So, members, we've already had the debate on this, and I'm hoping members are happy that I just invite Councillor Gallagher to sum up, and we move to a vote on the text that's in front of you. So, Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, just and the motion will be like saying that this is not an amendment that this council calls on. That Mayor, and again on the whole policing issue across the north and indeed the south, that it has to be. They see if this council is calling for chief constable of any police service, that has to be where the power of control is, not in a dark force. And some people have mentioned the killing of Lyra McKee. No one has mentioned why did such a force of police land on the Craigan at a late time of night that found absolutely nothing, created a chaos, and a woman lost her life. 2 years later, no one's asked that question. Why it is? There's a lot of dark forces behind this, and that needs to be rooted out completely if the previous motion has to have any effect whatsoever. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Just bear with me one second, John. Yes, John, I think we're going to raise the same thing.
Yeah, calls on who?
Yep, thank you. I'm going to ask Councillor Gallagher if you can just confirm that for us, please.
And this was pulled on as an amendment that it calls on the powers of the chief constable to have the powers of a chief constable. And you separated this from the previous motion that the chief constable coming in this chamber has to have the powers. If he doesn't have the powers, that if MI5 has the control and powers over him.
Yeah, so, you've said all of that, but I need to know who you want to call on, the chief constable.
That the chief call on the chief constable, they remove the powers of MI5.
Yep. So is that the text that you want put before the chamber now on screen?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. And you're happy with that? Yep.
Yes, Mayor.
Okay. And if I can just double check, Councillor Chiara is the seconder. You're happy to second that as it's slightly changed?
Happy enough, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Chief Executive, can you take us through the vote on the proposal that's before us, please?
Thank you. Alderman Devaney.
Against, John.
Alderman Guy,
Against.
Alderman Hussey,
Against.
Alderman Carrigan,
Against.
Alderman McClintock,
Against.
Alderman Ramsey,
Against.
Alderman Wark,
Against, John.
Councillor Jason Barr,
For, John.
Councillor Raymond Barr,
For, John.
Councillor John Boyle,
Yeah, for.
Councillor Michaela Boyle,
For, John.
Councillor Burke,
For.
Councillor Carr,
For.
Councillor Cusick,
For.
Councillor Dobbins,
For, John.
Councillor Donnelly,
Abstain.
Councillor Doyle,
For, John.
Councillor Duffy, Councillor Edwards,
For, John.
Councillor Farrell,
For.
Councillor Fleming,
For, John.
Councillor Gallagher,
For.
Councillor Harkin,
For.
Councillor Heaney,
For.
Councillor Jackson,
For, John.
Councillor Kelly,
For.
Councillor Logue,
For.
Councillor McGuire,
For.
Councillor McHugh,
For.
Sorry, was that Councillor McHugh?
Yes, John. For.
Thank you. Councillor McKeever,
For.
Councillor McKinney,
Abstain.
Councillor Mellon,
For.
Councillor Mooney,
For, John.
Councillor O'Neill,
For, John.
Councillor Riley,
For, John.
and Councillor Tierney.
For.
Thank you, members. Just a moment. Mayor, I've recorded 26 for, 7 against, and 2 abstentions, so that motion also passes.
Thank you, John. Thank you, members. Calling now on Councillor Donnelly.
Chair, thank you, Chair. And I just put it into the chat box there. And it's just basically, given the serious concerns following PSNI actions on vulnerable members of our community, Derry City Strabane District Council contact all schools in the district and call on them to end the practice of allowing the PSNI access to children under the guise of education. Chair, basically where I'm coming from.
Just before you go any further, can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Gallagher. Yep, go ahead.
Where I'm coming from this, Chair, it's over 20 years since the PSNI have been formed. My politics on policing are well known, you know, there's no doubt about that. But what I have heard for the duration of this meeting and previous meetings is that there's very, very serious concerns right across the board regarding the PSNI. You know, and this has been reflected by unionist councillors who have also said in previous meetings that there's a lack of confidence within unionist areas and regarding the PSNI. There's some people that said that they're there to hold them to account. This isn't being reflected on the streets in working class youth right across this city and district. There's issues. Now, what I'm saying, Chair, is that as adults, we can decide and we can make choices in an informed way. We can debate them here, but children can be vulnerable and impressionable. And I think given that serious nature that the vast majority of this council has admitted, I think that we should not allow our children, the PSNI, to have access to our children. And I'm not asking people to accept this motion solely even from my point of view or from a Republican point of view. If there's people who say that there's serious issues, then we need to consider our children, because, Chair, you know, schools should be a safe haven. And in my opinion, children do not need to be exposed to armed groups. The presence of these police officers in schools can cause distress to children, causing them anxiety, and it's not fair. And when people talked earlier about sending the message to the PSNI, then I think that people should support this motion and do it for his or her own reasons. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Mellon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for letting me in. I understand this is a very sensitive topic when it comes to our young people. But just like the forum that we have here today, where we have the forum day challenge and bring people to account and have our say, we inviting the PSNI in. I also believe that children and young people, through safe structures such as schools, should also be awarded or allowed that same forum as well. So it'll be for that reason and the reasons for young people to be able to represent themselves that we wouldn't be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mellon. Any further indicated speakers? Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, Gary, for bringing the motion forward. I have to say I wasn't expecting it, given what we were talking about, but I get where he's coming from. I think that it is abhorrent that a police service would feel it appropriate to go into an educational setting with firearms, and think by showing those young people firearms that in some way gives off any kind of aspiration of any member of any part of the community who wants their child to be shown that they can engage in they can run around with a gun as long as it's under the mantle of the PSNI or any other mantle for that reason. At the same time, I do get where Councillor Mellon's coming from. I suppose from my perspective, Mayor, I do have great difficulty in seeing even the school I went to having police officers in for things like careers days. But I suppose it's down to us as leaders in the communities that we represent to speak out on behalf of our constituents. I've been contacted a fair number of times by people who have great difficulty with their children being in the presence of the PSNI, knowing that the previous weekend, that same police force was engaged in harassing them. So I will support the motion. But I do think that what I don't want to see is schools being felt that they're being put under the kibosh here by council. They are educational institutions after all. I'm sure principals and teachers want to keep politics out of schools as much as we do. So that's the one caveat that I would say, but I will support the motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Councillor John Boyle.
Couple of points, Mayor. Well, the first one's been referenced there already by Councillor Doyle, and that is that schools actually should have it within their own capacity without any direction from politicians as to how they see fit to educate the young people in their care. Secondly, my understanding, and I do appreciate that the PSNI do visit our schools to help to educate our young people and our children about their safety on very many different challenges that exist for young people. So, Mayor, in a nutshell, the SDLP will not be supporting the motion presented to us here by Councillor Donnelly. There are many good things that come from our young people engaging with the police as well, and it's simply not just as black and white as it may well initially appear, as presented by Councillor Donnelly. I think in the first instance, the most important thing is to bear in mind the safety, the health and the safety of young people in our communities when we consider the challenges of drugs, alcohol, various individuals and communities that can present as dangers to young people, etc. So that's it. Mayor, we won't be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Councillor Sean Harkin.
Thanks, Mayor, and I commend Councillor Donnelly for bringing forward this, and I think that this kind of discussion actually gets to the heart of some of the issues here, because I've just listened to Councillor Boyle there, and I think he and maybe the SDLP miss what's happening around the world and here in Ireland about the questioning of the role of police in society. You know, I know you didn't participate in the demonstration, Black Lives Matter, where, you know, hundreds and hundreds of young people here were out protesting police violence, not just in America, but here. And I think there is lots of educational things that can be done in schools. A firefighter can go in and explain to someone how to avoid setting a fire, or what to do if there's a fire. If there's issues of drugs, you send people in who are experts on drug use, medical people, not a police officer, because they're not trained to actually do that. And this is the issue where police are being sent to houses and on the scale to deal with a mental health crisis. They should be nowhere near it. And so this whole idea that this is the educational role that the police play, I think has to be challenged. And I think that by you know, supporting this motion, I think we're sending a message to the PSNI. We're challenging them on the role that they're playing. And it's provoking, I think, an important discussion. There are experts that need to be going into the schools to help educate children, to keep them safe, to try and help them on their life path. But often the things that the police are there to talk about are not the things that they know anything about or are experts in. And it actually has the opposite impact of helping young people understand the issues. So, you know, for all them reasons, we think this is a good motion and we'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. Alderman McClintock.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll be very brief. We will not be supporting this motion. The PSNI do excellent work in our schools. The engagement with young people is a vital part of relationship building between our young people and the PSNI, and more of that relationship building is needed, not less. What kind of message really does this motion send out today to our young people that we're debating this? I'm thinking of, at the beginning of today's debate, we talked about remembering to moderate our language, and it's so important. Our language and our leadership today is vital on the message that we send out here to our young people. Do we really want to send out a message that young people shouldn't engage with the PSNI? I think not. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman McClintock. Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in response to, in particular, regards the motion, in response to Councillor Mellon and her response from her party, Chair and Mayor, could I remind them that it's been well documented here in the north around the intelligence services grooming young informants around what they would call a lot of issues. For example, armed groups, drug dealers, an informant on the local community. And that's been well documented. And it's been right through Parliament and laws that the government is saying they're happy to do it. And we, as a council, as a district council, should be saying we're not supporting the practice of allowing our children to be groomed by dark forces under a flag of convenience of policing. And we shouldn't be allowing it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Alderman Guy.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting me in. Yep, it's we all had our conversation earlier, and we all have issues with policing. But I've always believed children should be taught to respect the law and order. PSNI school liaison officers attend schools to inform kids about road safety, the dangers of fireworks, internet safety, and so on. It's a very good learning tool. Our party will have nothing to do with this. I seem to remember Republican paramilitary groups trying this same tactic, and our party won't be part of it. We won't be supporting this motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Guy. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Mayor, and to fully endorse, obviously, my group leader's comments. And I'm going back to Councillor Doyle, who referred to armed police officers going into schools. I think one thing that Councillor Doyle and others need to remember.
Sorry, Alderman Hussey. Point of order from Councillor Ely Millen.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, for letting me back in. It was just that Councillor Gallagher didn't speak to the motion on the floor. He talked about child grooming, and I wholeheartedly condemn any allegations that we're here supporting childhood grooming. And it's not of any case, or it's not on that floor tonight. So I would just like to make that very clear.
Thank you. Go ahead, Alderman Hussey.
Thank you. So there's somebody else there.
Go ahead, Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Mayor. As I said, Councillor Doyle referred to armed officers going into schools. I think he would be better concentrating on the reason why that might be the case. I taught in Castlederrick Secondary, Castlederrick High School, from 71 to 1998, 27 years. Within our staff, there were 7 who carried personal protection weapons in the staff in the school. And, you know, you think, what was the reason that had to be? Well, that was the situation they were in. You know, so it's unfortunate that our officers, police officers, find themselves having to protect themselves. But, you know, the reasons as to why that might be should also be taken into consideration. Councillor Guy has fully outlined the good work that is done by good officers on the ground, our neighbourhood teams, etc. And, you know, they are the people who need to gain and build up that familiarity with young people in their own area, so that when something does happen, they are there on the ground. They know the young people. They can help diffuse situations. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. Members, no further indicated speakers, so I'm going to go back to Councillor Donnelly.
Look, thanks for letting me in, and you know, the point that Councillor Gallagher made, you know, I think it's one of the more important points. You know, the PSNI have a child informer recruitment policy that's been admitted by them, and if this doesn't send shockwaves, you know, this council just passed another motion about MI5. Who do people think is responsible for recruiting informants? It's MI5, and these people should not have access to young, impressionable, vulnerable children. And you know, and I'm disappointed by some of the parties here who have refused to support this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. I'm going to ask the Chief Executive to take us through the vote on this motion, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Alderman Devaney. Alderman Devaney.
Against, John. Against.
Alderman Guy.
Against.
Alderman Hussey.
Against.
Alderman Carrigan.
Against.
Alderman McClintock.
Against.
Alderman Ramsey.
Against.
Alderman Wark.
Against.
Councillor Jason Barr.
Against.
Councillor Raymond Barr.
For.
Councillor John Boyle.
Against.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
John.
Councillor Burke.
Against.
Councillor Carr.
Abstain.
Councillor Cusick.
Against.
Councillor Dobbins. Councillor Dobbins. Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Doyle.
For, John.
Councillor Duffy. Councillor Edwards.
John.
Councillor Farrell,
Against.
Councillor Fleming,
Against, John.
Councillor Gallagher,
For.
Councillor Harkin,
For.
Councillor Heaney,
Against, John.
Councillor Jackson,
Against, John.
Councillor Kelly,
Against.
Councillor Logue, Councillor Maguire,
Against.
Councillor McHugh,
Against.
Councillor McKeever,
Against.
Councillor McKinney, Councillor McKinney, Councillor Mellon,
Against, John.
Councillor Mooney,
Against, John.
Councillor O'Neill,
For, John.
Councillor Riley,
Against, John.
Councillor Tierney.
Against.
Thank you, members. Mayor, I've recorded 6 for, 26 against, and 1 abstention. So the motion falls.
Thank you, John. Thank you, members. Councillor Sean Harkin.
There, it's actually myself that's going to
Sorry, apologies,
this-
Councillor
no,
O'Neill.
no,
Go
you're
ahead.
fine. So yeah, so I've just shared a proposal there in the chat box, and I think it's
Just before you go any further, can I get a seconder for that, please? And can we get it on the screen as well? Thank you, Councillor Harkin. Go ahead, Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, Mayor. Suppose the reason that this meeting was called in the first place was of what happened in Scale, where someone called the emergency services for help and they nearly ended up dead. And I think this is like what we've seen around the world with more heavy-handed police responses. And, you know, it really does astound me that when someone is in a mental health crisis,
Surely this is not valid. This is already the position.
I'm just reading it myself, John. Yeah, can I get, Councillor O'Neill, whilst I appreciate what you're trying to do with this particular motion, Council has supported and indeed funded with others the Crisis Intervention Centre. I and others have worked with the steering group to try and ensure appropriate funding was there in place for that and for all of those resources. And for me, this is really much a work in progress for Council and all of our key stakeholders around mental health crisis. So I really see this as already being the position of Council.
okay.
Point of order from Councillor Harkin.
Yeah, sorry. I was a bit surprised it was the CEO coming in to object to a people before profit motion there. So
Can you raise your point of order, please?
yeah, so if Maeve takes out the call for the crisis intervention team, it should be a fine motion to put forward. You're right. It is what we do already support it, but it's not. There's nothing.
Councillor Harkin, I don't want you explaining what Councillor O'Neill may or may not do. I'm only giving my opinion on the text that's before me, and the text that's before me, as I see it, is not admissible because it's already the position of Council. And in my opinion, Council are working extremely hard to ensure that this comes to pass anyway. And I don't see why we need to have another proposal to debate it.
So, Mayor,
I'm not going to get on. I'm not
Can
going
I
to
ask you? Are you saying that the Council's position is to say that the police shouldn't be first responders in an emergency situation?
Council's position, as I understand it, around the Crisis Intervention Centre, which I've already outlined, and Council are working extremely hard in doing that and trying to provide with others the appropriate funding.
But that's not what I asked you. I says, are you saying now
I'm
that the
giving you my
council's
opinion
position
on that
is the
position.
council's position to say that we shouldn't have armed police turning up at people's doors who are in an emergency, who have called for emergency help if they're in a mental health crisis?
Councillor Harkin, again, I am giving you my opinion on the text that's before me. The text which both yourself and your colleague have proposed to this council. I don't see the text, the complete text that's before me is
Well, we're going to change the text
admissible.
now.
Well, if
Right,
you
one
change the
second.
text, that's fine, but
Yep.
you need to do it very quickly because at this
Yep.
point, there's no further business in this meeting.
Yep.
So are you telling me, is Councillor O'Neill telling me through you that she's withdrawn this proposal? Is Councillor O'Neill saying that she's withdrawing this proposal?
Mayor, I like obviously like I'm new to council here, and
Yeah.
you know I feel that this motion is bigger than a crisis intervention centre. It's looking at the mental health response for people in crisis here, and you know what I was saying was that it astounds me that it is the PSNI who respond to people in these situations, and as part of the crisis intervention centre, that outreach service should exist so that professionals, mental health professionals who are appropriately trained can respond to these crises as an outreach for when people, you know, rather than the PSNI, because often whenever the police do attend, the situation can worsen, as we've seen in Scale. So I'm happy to reword, Mayor.
Can I get an opinion from either the Chief Executive or Philip on the entire text which is before us?
Yeah, sorry, Mayor, just before I do that, just to say that the wording that the members would have heard from me was because I had left my mic on and I was in consultation with Philip Kingston at the time. I wasn't trying in any way to interfere with the meeting, so I wasn't making that comment to you or to the members, Mayor. My mic had been left. We were debating, Philip and I, the merits of the proposal. So I'll actually ask Philip now to come in, please.
It sure sounds like you were trying to interfere.
Councillor Donnelly, can you please have order, please?
That's me leaving my mic on, consulting with myself.
Yeah, Councillor Donnelly, please.
Maybe Philip,
So,
if he's on the call, could come in then, please.
So, Chair, the wording that was on the screen, Chair, and it was I felt defective for two reasons. Firstly, Chair, that the issues in and around the Crisis Intervention Centre, I felt fell outside the scope of this. I feel fall outside the scope of this meeting. And would merit separate discussion on a separate occasion, but also, Chair, then for the point that you yourself have made, and the fact that that already deals with the council position in relation to the matter. So that's it. It's not for me to comment on the potential rewording of the motion.
Thank you, Philip. Members, I hope that clears it up. And for those reasons and the reasons that I've already outlined, the text that's on the screen is not admissible. Point of order from Alderman Hussey.
Point of order from Councillor Harkin too.
Well, can you just wait your turn, please?
Chair, I'm sorry, I haven't sent my point of order on the chat box as well.
Sorry, you're right. You were. Councillor Gallagher, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just Chair, and it's not likely, and we have had a debate that's gone for 2 hours, and people have had differences of opinion, but I've been very respectful up to this point. Chair, I believe that when this motion came on the floor, that for some reason your tone changed. That and Chair, I think that you should give some bearings to the fact that the proposer is a very relatively new councillor, that it appeared, and my impression, and it's my perception, that your tone completely changed, and it was nearly rodent. It was verging on aggressive to a new councillor, and it was very, very demanding, and it was very final. And I think that, and the chief executive give his mistaken intervention that wasn't for this meeting; it was for private. But the context of the chief executive intervening and you intervening, I think that was disrespectful to this new councillor, and I think you should apologise.
Thank you for that. I don't see where I came across as aggressive when I was speaking to Councillor O'Neill or indeed to Councillor Harkin. I was simply trying to put a point of view across whilst a particular councillor was speaking over the top of me. I have never tried in any time that I've been in the physical chamber or in this virtual chamber as mayor, believe that I've never been disrespectful to a colleague and never would be deliberately disrespectful to a colleague. So,
Maybe
excuse me, look, you're doing the same. You know, can you let me finish? I sat and listened to what you had to say. Can you please let me finish? I have never been disrespectful. I haven't tried, and I would never try to be disrespectful to anyone on this virtual chamber or in the physical chamber. I was simply trying to get a point of view across. And when I did potentially raise my voice a little to be heard, and that's the only reason that I did, it was to Councillor Harkin. It wasn't even to Councillor O'Neill. So that, as far as I see, Councillor Gallagher, is the end of that matter. The Chief Executive has already outlined his reason and for that intervention. And as far as I'm concerned, that's that part of the matter dropped. Point of order from Councillor Derek or Alderman Derek Hussey.
Thank you, Mayor. And it's a query to the legal officer. We've had a couple of point of orders. It's my understanding that if someone asks for a point of order, they are required to state the standing order that they're bringing the point of order under. Is that correct? Thank you.
Philip?
Yeah, Chair, that is the specific wording of the standing order. I do have to also say, Chair, that is not something that has been rigorously observed in the chamber in the past, but certainly Alderman Hussey is correct. That is the actual wording of the standing order does say that should be specified.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. Thank you, Philip, for that. So the text which is on screen, I have deemed unadmissible, and I understand from the chat box, if members can just give me a second there, read, there's a further proposal from Councillor Harkin, which I haven't got to see yet. Can we get the text on screen, please? I'm failing to see where the difference in the two proposals is at this stage. And before we go any further, I'm going to ask for a legal opinion on the text that's on screen, please, Philip.
Chair, I think that's pretty much the same wording. We're still, for the same reasons previously, we're still within the realm of dealing with a fully resourced crisis intervention centre.
Sorry, Philip and Mayor, sorry to interrupt there, but that's the same proposal. I'm just trying to save you a bit of time.
Right, okay.
So I
you
think
didn't put on a new one?
Councillor O'Neill has put a changed final paragraph in there to the chat box.
Yeah, give us.
Right, so
I'll get it on screen in a second for you.
yes, well, can you please, members, if you just bear with me, that we make sure that before we debate the proposal that we've got the exact text which is on screen for you to debate. So if you just bear with us, please. To save any confusion, can we take out that middle paragraph completely off screen? Thank you. Councillor O'Neill, can you confirm for us if that text which is on screen is the proposal that you wish to put to the floor?
Yes, Mayor, that there is my proposal.
Okay, and I'm assuming that's seconded by Councillor Harkin. Yeah. Can I ask Philip if that falls within the realms of this particular meeting?
Well, Chair, I don't see that motion.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Philip. Councillor O'Neill, if you'd like to address your motion, please.
Okay, so I don't know whether to pick up from where I was interrupted. But yeah, I just feel that like people in crisis, it's not helping when the PSNI are by their side. I think, you know, this is a broader picture of the serious lack of funding that exists for our health service, but particularly for mental health services. You know, we need trained professionals as first responders in these situations. If, you know, in the development of our crisis intervention centre, we need that outreach service. And, you know, I think that this incident in Scale really highlights the issue of the PSNI as those first responders. It would be far more helpful, and I think it would add to the mental health provisions that exist in the City and District if trained mental health professionals were instead the people who responded in these situations of a mental health crisis.
Thanks very much, Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor O'Neill, for bringing the motion. We agree with every word that's in this motion, and we were happy to agree with the motion that was presented previous to this as well, because I know this council has a proud record in terms of calling for increased provision, mental health provision within our district, and specifically in relation to calling for and campaigning for a crisis intervention centre. But in relation to the motion that's in front of us, and I'm referring to the incident that happened in Topple Hill on Saturday night. It does show that reaffirms the fact that there is a crisis, there's a mental health crisis within our district, and it isn't always appropriate that the first people to respond are the PSNI. People do need support, and unfortunately, in some cases, that support isn't forthcoming from the police service. So, Mayor, as a party, we're fully supportive of the motion that's in front of us. Our mental health services need radical change. The police service needs radical change, and we, on that basis, we're content and happy to support the motion that's in front of us. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks very much, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Doyle.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to Councillor O'Neill for bringing the motion forward. Yes, I am content to support this, Mayor, because I think it fits in with some of the work streams that we're already doing in terms of yes, about the crisis intervention, but also the work of the mental health working group has put forward response to the mental health strategy in relation to the regional crisis intervention service that the mental health champion for the Department of Health has put forward. So we, of course, we want to see that that's done, and where possible, in line with motion passed in council recently, that's situated in the city. It is a shocking indictment of where we are, that the first responders to an obvious situation where there was mental health difficulties, for example, was the police. I know in situations in times gone by where I've come across individuals with experiencing difficulties that even in ringing some of the organisations in the town for help, didn't have the resources even to assist, which is again quite sad and shows how far we have to go. So happy to support the motion, and yeah, hopefully when we get the response back from the Department of Health on the mental health consultation, that we'll see some form of a crisis intervention service that's fit for purpose. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Alderman Guy.
Mayor, let me in. Look, first of all, start off by saying I can see what Councillor O'Neill is saying here with this here motion, but I just want to ask a few questions. So first, if the police are asked to respond, I'm talking about the second paragraph here. If the police are asked to respond to a situation or an issue, then they have a duty to respond if they get the call. Now, I don't know if that second paragraph is that, can we actually put a motion like this forward? We've been told through the meeting to be careful about what we've actually says, but this is speaking about an ongoing ombudsman investigation, which we don't know. Was it the PSNI or Northern Ireland Ambulance Service were called? So really, should we be even speaking about that part? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Guy. Before we had the debate, Alderman Guy, I asked for an opinion and Philip gave it. So on that basis, we've moved forward. But I note your concern. Councillor Ferguson.
Could I just reply there, Mayor? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I actually thought it was about the last paragraph, the fact that it had already been used by council about the crisis intervention service. I didn't think it was about the second paragraph in regards to the armed police.
No, well, when I asked for an opinion, Alderman Guy, I asked for it on the entire proposal that was before us. And as I understand it, that's what the answer was given on that basis.
Okay, Mayor, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mayor, and apologies for missing the first part of the meeting. We have no problem with this motion. I don't know if Councillor McKinney had said we've met with Chief Superintendent Darren Jones, who himself agrees that the police are not necessarily the first people to respond to mental health issues. He has told us about times in which police officers have had to take someone away from the bridge and stay with them for the entire weekend because that mental health service isn't available, and that there was a pilot where first responders and ambulance with a mental health nurse were done with alongside other police forces, and he himself has admitted that that would be much more compassionate way in which they could address mental health call-outs. So I think it's upon us to lobby to make sure that those resources are put in place, because, you know, it can be very, very scary for someone who's going through a crisis to be approached by a PSNI officer, and they are only too aware of that. So I think that, you know, this is something that we need to look at, and we need to make sure that the police will only ever be called in the last instance, because everything else, other resources are there in place to look after our residents. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Alderman McClintock. Alderman McClintock. Not there. Councillor Harkin.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead, Alderman McClintock. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. The motion that stands before us, Mayor, I think it would be difficult to disagree with any of the points on it, because obviously no one could really disagree with the fact that it's really important to support anyone with mental health issues. And the next point about the PSNI are not necessarily the best people to go into a situation like this. It can worsen the situation. And on the third point as well, the best resources are those mental health workers who are trained. But I suppose I am wary of the fact as well that in some ways there is a an assumption made here, an assumption made that the PSNI know that they are going to a vulnerable person. There's also the point that has been raised earlier, the PSNI have a duty if they're called to go to a situation like this. And we've also heard of PSNI officers having to stay with somebody because the support isn't there. So I am a wee bit uncomfortable with any linking of this motion to a particular incident, because I don't like any sort of a label being put on any individual. But I note that the actual motion as before us doesn't actually link it particularly to an incident. So in its general form, happy to support.
Thank you, Alderman McClintock. Councillor Sean Harkin.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, look, this is a constructive motion, as the discussion demonstrates, and I think those who try to disrupt Councillor O'Neill's efforts to bring it forward should apologise there. And I just wanted to say, I think Councillor Doyle mentioned the mental health crisis, and I think that this proposal really complements that, in the sense that we have acknowledged that in our city we have a mental health crisis, and that we're still in the midst of this pandemic, and we don't want to compound the tragedy of a mental health crisis with people inadvertently getting hurt because they call for help. And let's be honest as well, look, I'm sure the PSNI would prefer not to be the people who are being called upon to deal with people who are in distress, and that we actually need a fully resourced health service and mental health service that can actually help people. And that's what this is about. This I think is complements our positions on the health service. It complements our position that we've taken on the emergency mental health crisis. So it's encouraging to hear people engaging positively with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. Councillor Raymond Barr.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is probably the best motion that's come before council tonight. I think it's a no-brainer that Iron Police are not first responders in dealing with an individual with mental health problems. And I agree with previous speakers that this incident, which could have had a fatal outcome, clearly illustrates the shortcomings which exist in our supply of mental health care, and reinforces the need for this council to redouble its efforts to ensure proper funding is obtained to address this issue. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barr. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to say too that it was very unsavoury, the disruption, the Councillor O'Neill's motion, and that the people responsible should apologise. However, I'd like to commend her for bringing this motion. It's common sense. And as we've seen in the water side, Iron Police land a situation like this actually worsens the situation. And this isn't a PSNI thing. This is right throughout the world, and we've seen it in the 26 counties too. So I'd like to commend Councillor O'Neill for the motion, and I support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Alderman Hussey with an amendment.
Simple amendment to the second paragraph, Mayor.
Yeah, can we see the amendment on screen, please? And have we got a seconder for it? A seconder for Alderman Hussey's amendment?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Alderman Hussey.
Yep. All I'm doing is saying can often worsen the situation, replacing that by saying that it is inappropriate. Full stop.
Okay, members, there's an amendment before you which slightly changes the middle paragraph. Councillor Doyle.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks to Derek for the amendment. I don't think at this point that I could support it, because I do think referencing often worsen the situation is more to the reality that I've seen. I mean, Chair, I'm sure you know, and other members are aware of the work that fall prevention team, for example, carry out totally voluntarily every single night to 3 in the morning. And those people who are trained and endeavour to be trained and supported are the people in conjunction with their partners, for example, and that they would pass distressed people perhaps onto? Are the people and have the right temperament to address issues where people are in distress? So unfortunately, I can't support Derek's amendment. I do get where he's coming from, but I do think that it's more to my experience that it can often worsen the situation when police are involved in that scenario. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Members, there's no further indicated speakers on the amendment, so I'm going to ask the Chief Executive to take us through it, please.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members. Alderman Devaney. Alderman Guy.
For.
Alderman Hussey.
For.
Alderman Carrigan.
For.
Alderman McClintock.
For.
Alderman Ramsey.
For.
Alderman Wark.
For.
Councillor Jason Barr.
For.
Councillor Raymond Barr.
Against.
Councillor John Boyle.
For.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
Against.
Councillor Burke.
Against.
Councillor Carr.
Against.
Councillor Cusick. Councillor Dobbins.
John.
Sorry, Councillor Dobbins, just say again, please.
For.
Councillor Donnelly.
Against.
Councillor Doyle.
Against.
Councillor Edwards.
For.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Councillor Ferguson.
For, John.
Councillor Fleming.
Against, John.
Councillor Gallagher.
Against.
Councillor Harkin.
Against.
Councillor Heaney.
Against.
Councillor Jackson.
Against.
Councillor Kelly.
Against.
Councillor Logue.
Against.
Councillor Maguire.
Against.
Councillor McHugh.
Against,
Councillor
John.
Councillor McKeever. Councillor McKeever. Councillor McKinney. Councillor McKinney. Councillor Mellon. Councillor Mellon. Councillor Mooney.
For.
Councillor O'Neill.
Against.
Councillor Riley.
For.
Councillor Tierney.
For.
Thank you. And in the chat box there, I see Councillor Cusick is for. So just give me a moment, please, Mayor. Mayor, I have recorded 16 for and 16 against. I'm just going to check that again to make sure I've done the maths right. Yeah, Mayor, I have recorded 16 for and 16 against. So in accordance with our standing orders, Mayor, you would have the casting vote unless Philip has recorded anything different. Philip, can you confirm that, please?
No, Chair, I'd recorded 16 for and 16 against as well.
Okay.
Okay, thank you both for that. I voted for the amendment in the first vote, and that hasn't changed, so I'll be voting for again.
Okay. Thank you.
So the amendment has passed, members, and we revert back now to the substantive motion. I have no further indicated speakers on that. Sorry, Councillor Riley.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you. Happy to speak in favour of the motion that's there before us, now amended. I'm conscious that there has been some discussion about this being linked to what happened on Saturday night, but I know the text in front of us doesn't in any way limit or link to a particular incident. So I think that it's important that we point that out. In relation to the motion, I think it is clear that that police, when attending the scene of these types of incidences, do need to do that in a way that is there to assist. Having guns in that environment is not helpful. We, as part of today's meeting, we have met with our own groups and spoken to others. As I said at the start when I was speaking earlier on this afternoon, we met with the police and had discussions with them. And I think that there is an opportunity for the council, given that my motion was passed earlier on, that when the senior police officers and the policing board come to this chamber, that we put this particular wording that's there on the screen to them in relation to expressing the points that we want to see policing in our society to be done in a peaceful way without guns. But attached to that, Mayor, is the fact that we need to identify that police officers going around their duty, dealing with calls of all descriptions, attending any incidences where they're called, often have to have firearms because of the threat that is placed upon them by others, by people who want to attack them and kill them, just as we saw, and I mentioned this earlier in relation to the attack that happened on a police constable earlier this week in the northwest. So if people are serious about encouraging the police to be unarmed, they need to also help work to take the guns out of society in all descriptions, not just those that are there by those that are responding to 999 calls. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Alderman Guy.
Mayor, we have no bother supporting this motion and everything it stands for. And I'm not going to say much more on it, but I just have to, I'd like to be added the Councillor Riley's comments there. Totally agree with what he's saying. The police, someone else says earlier that like the police don't want to be showing up. They don't want to be the first responders to the incidents that involve mental health, but often they are. I only have to note that how many times they're the first responders when somebody's standing on the other side of them railings on the bridge, and we shouldn't forget that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Guy. I'm going to go back to Councillor O'Neill to sum up.
Thanks, Mayor, and appreciate all the points that have been made, and thanks for those who supported me in bringing this motion forward. And I am surprised by the interruption to it initially, given it highlights the severe mental health crisis that we have in this city. And I think that is the crux of this motion, is around the underfunding and the under-resourcing of mental health services and of the health service. And whenever our healthcare services are properly resourced, we do a really, really good job in supporting people of this community. And as people have said, the PSNI, don't want to be the ones who are responding to these situations. And so just to really reiterate the point that, if we can give properly funded mental health care services, to address the mental health crisis, then to get the staffing to outreach in these situations to respond to individuals experiencing mental health crises. That is the crux of this, and it's the reason that we came here today was around the mental health crisis and the police response to it. So if we can get properly funded healthcare services, then hopefully a situation like this can be averted in the future. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. Chief Executive, can you take us through the vote on the motion before us?
Thank you. Alderman Devaney. Alderman Guy.
For.
Alderman Hussey.
For.
Alderman Carrigan. Alderman Carrigan. Alderman McClintock.
For.
Alderman Ramsey.
For.
Alderman Wark.
For.
Councillor Jason Barr.
For, John.
Councillor Raymond Barr.
For.
Councillor John Boyle.
For.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
John,
Thank you.
sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Burke.
For.
Councillor Carr.
For, John.
Councillor Cusack.
For John.
Councillor Dobbins.
For John.
Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Doyle.
For.
Councillor Edwards.
For, John.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Councillor Ferguson.
For, John.
Councillor Fleming.
For, John.
Councillor Gallagher.
For.
Councillor Harkin.
For.
Councillor Heaney.
For.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Kelly.
For.
Councillor Logue.
John.
Councillor Maguire. Councillor Maguire. Councillor McHugh.
For, John.
Councillor McKeever. Councillor Mellon. Councillor Mooney.
For.
Councillor O'Neill.
For.
Councillor Riley.
For.
Councillor Tierney.
For.
Thank you. Mayor, that I think is unanimous of those present and voting. Do you want me to do a total on that?
I don't think so. I think everyone
Okay.
agrees it's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Members, that we've no further speakers. I just want to thank you all for your attendance and for the tone of debate right throughout this meeting. It has been some very, very important issues that we've all spoken about, and I think everyone showed a level of respect for each other's views and opinions that are held dear to each of us. So I just wanted to comment on that and thank you all for your participation. That's our meeting now closed, members. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor.
Mayor.